you believe it? We are starting our 9th week of Better News Daily. 9 weeks. Wow. And I didn't even start this right when quarantine started. This was a couple weeks after church gatherings were put on hold that I started this. So it's been a long time at this point. Putting together these devotional thoughts has been really rewarding for me. I get to explore books of the Bible that I don't often turn to. I'm expanding my own understanding of these different stories and passages. And I get to, in some way, talk and interact with those of you who are watching, which is great. And you know, after 8 full weeks, making these videos feels like normal now. I know my schedule for how to get these videos done efficiently. I brainstorm my ideas, research the book of the Bible that was chosen, list out some potential passages to explore, sift through my giant list of illustration ideas, and then I write out all of my thoughts and connect everything all together. And then it's time to film. I make Rachel leave the room and put headphones on, which she's nice enough to do. And after I'm done filming, I edit it all together, export the video, upload it, and then I'm thinking about ideas for the next book of the Bible that we're going to. It's a well-oiled machine at this point, and this all feels like my normal now. And this is the word that I want to talk about with you today. Normal. I'm sure that you've heard people say, I can't wait until we get back to normal. You've heard this, right? I miss going to work, or going to church, or going to school, or visiting my friends. I wish it would all get back to normal. My thought for you today is based on something that I heard recently that really challenged and convicted me, and I hope that it will do the same for you. The book of the Bible we're going to today is the book of Exodus. One of my favorite verses in the whole Bible is actually part of the passage that we're going to look at today. It's a great sticky note verse, if you remember me talking about that a little while back. So Exodus is the story of, obviously, the Exodus, the Israelites' mass departure from the land of Egypt. And this book is one of the most exciting in the entire Bible. It reads like the screenplay for a $200 million movie, full of action and special effects and dramatic conflict. It's awesome. It's the story of how God rescues the people of Israel from the land of Egypt where they were in slavery. And he takes them to the land that he had promised long ago to their ancestor Abraham. Now, God sends 10 plagues onto the land of Egypt, and after that, Pharaoh reluctantly agrees to let the people go. And when this happens, how long had the people of Israel been in slavery at that point? Do you remember? We're told in chapter 12 of Exodus that the length of time the people had lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt. So if you're part of a nation that has been enslaved for 430 years, that's all you know, right? That's your normal. You don't know any differently. Backbreaking work under the whip of the Egyptians is your normal grind of life. Keep this in mind. I want to go with you to the middle of chapter 14. At this point in the story, the people have left Egypt, but Pharaoh has changed his mind about letting the people go. So he goes with his army to chase down the people. And the Israelites, they're in front of the Red Sea, stuck, when they realize that Pharaoh's army is coming to get them. Verse 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. I mean, that makes sense, right? This would be terrifying. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." The people say, "We want to go back to Egypt." Really? I thought you wanted to leave. Why now do you want to go back? See, they would rather go back to bondage than to face the fear of the unknown. They would rather dig their graves in Egypt than to stand in an uncertain situation. Do you see where I'm going with this? Our world has been turned upside down lately. And this can all feel really stressful and worrisome and alarming. And I hear people every day craving to go back to a normal that they were complaining about 3 months ago. And I don't want to be overdramatic here, but I think that there are so many ways of living life that feel normal that are actually killing us. Thoughts, patterns, relationships, schedules that are killing us. But it's normal, and we'd rather go back there than to face the uncertainty of what's around us right now. We're used to living in stress and not getting enough sleep and hurrying through life and clinging to escapist behaviors, but what if that normal is not what God wants you to live in? What if this pandemic is potentially an opportunity for you to reevaluate and reprioritize your heart and your mind to actually begin to live in health and wellness? See, you can just go back to normal on the other side of coronavirus, but there's also an alternative. Watch what happens with the Israelites. Verse 13, Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again." Moses says, you're not going back. What you know as normal is not your destiny. God is taking you somewhere new. And how will this happen? Here's the sticky note verse that I absolutely love. Exodus 14:14. Very easy to remember. 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. If you just be still and let God fight, He's going to take you somewhere new. Wow. Now Moses tells them in that verse that they will never go back to where they were. But the sad part of the story is that they do. They leave the Egyptians behind, but they take Egypt with them. If you just keep reading through Exodus, you see the Israelites again and again regress to what feels normal. And what I want to tell you today is this: don't make that same mistake. I know that we all say that what we want is to get back to normal. But is that really what's best? In some ways, it might be. There are probably lots of, quote, normal things in your life that are great and healthy. But if you did an inventory of what your normal life looked like, is there anything in there that you shouldn't return to? Are there parts of your normal life that actually enslave you that you need to leave behind? Is this pandemic a chance for you to leave normal behind and enter into something new? Let me share with you one more verse from this passage, verse 15. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." Tell the Israelites to move on. Now, I know that that's just a translation choice, but this wording makes a perfect point for what we're talking about. What if what God wants for you in the midst of coronavirus is to move on? What if instead of craving what is familiar, we begin to crave new freedoms and new opportunities that God has in store? What if this pandemic isn't an interruption in what is normal, but a transition into something new and better? We're in a time of uncertainty, yes. But don't just regress to what feels familiar and comfortable. Use this as an opportunity to move on, to move forward. I've got 2 questions for you today. First, what normal might God be moving you out of? Is there a way that you used to do life that isn't actually healthy and life-giving? Were there parts of your normal that looked a lot more like slavery than freedom? Are there patterns or thoughts or relationships or busyness that God is hoping to move you out of? This question has a second part to it, though. What new normal might God be moving you towards? As you decide where it is that you don't want to go back to, what direction is God leading you in? If God wants your mind to be more at peace than it was before, what does that look like? What permanent changes can you start to make to claim what God wants for you? If God wants you to have more commitment in your walk with Him, how do you plan to implement that so that you don't just go back to what feels normal? I want to wrap up, but one last thing. I don't believe that God in any way has caused this pandemic. It is the result of a broken world and a destructive spiritual enemy. But I do believe that God is big enough and loving enough to take any rotten thing that happens in this world and redirect it towards something good. Coronavirus doesn't have to be an interruption before we can get back to normal. It can be the transition point to a new normal that is healthier and more fulfilling than anything prior. Tomorrow, we are going to be in a different book of the Bible. Make sure you subscribe to our channel before you leave this video so you can keep getting these in your feed every morning. We are going to go to the book of Nehemiah. Great. I actually already have a thought in mind for what I want to share for that book. So that's perfect. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means so much to see so many of you tuning in every single day. And I think we're going to keep making these until the Bible is completely finished. So here's to that. Anyway, have a good rest of your day. Bye.